Hi everyone. Hope you all are good. We are here for grade 2 math. You can find all the lessons on aplusstudents.com. You have to log in there using your email address and password as provided by the administrator. Then you have to select math from the subject tab. Scroll down to grade 2 math and then click on view all lessons. There you can find a list of the chapters. We're going to start with the chapter time. So please make sure you have your notebook and pencil so that you can note down the important examples and definitions as well. Here I am on grade 2 math. Chapter we are on right now is time. Let's just start with the lesson that is match analog clocks and times. What time does the clock show? So the clock has two hands, a shorter one and the longer one, right? So look at the shorter hand. The shorter hand is pointing to 3, so that means it is 3 o'clock, while the longer hand is pointing to 12, so that means it is 3 hours and 0 minutes, right? The shorter hand always points to the hours, while the longer hand points to the minutes, so that is 3 o'clock, 3 hours and 0 minutes, right? Let's just start with the test questions. What time does the clock show? So the shorter hand and the longer hand, they both are pointing to 12, right? So that means it is 12 hours and 0 minutes. So that means 12 hours and 0 minutes. It is option number 1 is the correct option. That is option number 1. What time does the clock show? So which is the correct option? So the shorter hand is pointing to 1, while the longer hand is pointing to 12. So, which is the correct option? That is 1 o'clock. Option number 3 is the correct option. The correct option is 1. Okay, what time does the clock show? So, which is the correct option? Both the hands are pointing to 12, so that is 12 hours and 0 minutes. The correct option is option number 4. What time does the clock show? So, which is the correct option? The correct option is 4 o'clock. Option number 4 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? That is, the shorter hand is pointing to 10, while the longer one is pointing to 12. So, that means 10 o'clock it is. Option number 1 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? That is very good. 9 o'clock, option number 4 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? Which is the correct option? The correct option is 3 o'clock. Option number 2 is the correct option. Okay, you can complete the lesson by yourself later today. Let me just move on to next lesson. The next lesson is may match digital clocks and times. Match digital clocks and times. So which clock shows 10:30, which is the correct option? Very good. The first one is the correct option because you can see here the first one, the 10:30 means you have 10 hours and wait, that is 10 hours and 30 minutes, right? So the first one shows 10 hours and 30 minutes. So the correct option is 10 hours and 30 minutes. So option number, the first one shows 10:30. Let's just start with the test questions. Which clock shows 1:30, which is the correct option? So 1:30 means 1 hour and 30 minutes. Option number 2 is the correct option, right? 1:30 means 1 hours and 30 minutes. So option number 2 is the correct option, that is 1 hour and 30 minutes. Which clock shows 8:15? So 8:15 means 8 hours and 15 minutes. The correct option is 8:15. Option number 2 is the correct option. Option number 2, like first option is the correct option, but that is the second clock. 8:15 it is. Which clock shows 5:30? 5:30. That means 5 hours and 30 minutes. 'The correct option is the second one. This clock shows 5:30, option number 1 is the correct option. So which clock shows 3 o'clock? Option number, like the first clock shows 3 o'clock, so option number 1 is the correct option. Which clock shows 3:45? So which is the correct option? 3:45. 3 hours and 45 minutes, right? Option number 1 is the correct option. Which clock shows 5:15? 5:15 it is. Very good. Option number, like the first clock is the correct option. That shows 5 hours and 15 minutes. So option number 1, but the option number 1 is the correct option. 1 means the clock number. Which clock shows 3:15? The correct option is 3:15. The second one is the correct option. That shows 3 hours and 15 minutes. Which clock shows 9:15? So which is the correct option? That is 9:15. The first one is the correct option. Okay, you can complete the lesson by yourself later today. Let me just move on to next lesson. Which clock shows 8:30? Let's just move on to next lesson. That is read clocks and write times hours. What time does the clock show? So we are going to learn how do we read clocks, right? So to find the hour, we need to look at the hour hand, that is the shorter hand, right? So the shorter hand is pointing to 2. So the hour hand shows 2 hours. The clock shows 2 o'clock, like 2 hours and 0 minutes. Let's just start with the test questions. What time does the clock show? So the shorter hands match to 11. That means 11 o'clock it is. 11 hours and 0 minutes. The correct option is 11 o'clock. Option number 4 is the correct option. Very good. What time does the clock show? That is 9 o'clock, right? The correct option is option number 3, 9 o'clock it is. What time does the clock show? Which is the correct option? That is 4 o'clock. Option number 1 is the correct option. Option number 4 is the correct option. Very good. That is 2 o'clock. What time does the clock shows? Very good. 1 o'clock it is. Option number 4 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? Which is the correct option? Very good. 6 o'clock it is. What time does the clock show? That is 3 o'clock. The correct option is 3. What time does the clock show? Which is the correct option? That is 8 o'clock. Option number 2 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? That is 5 o'clock. Option number 1 is the correct option. Okay, you can complete the lesson by yourself later today. Let me just move on to next lesson. The next lesson is read clocks and write times. So let's just start with the lesson. What time does the clock show? So which is the correct option? That is 10 hours and 0 minutes. So the correct option is 10 o'clock. Let's just start with the test questions. The shorter hand is between 5 and 6, while the longer hand is pointing to 6, right? So that means it is 5 hours and 30 minutes. Let's just start with the test question. Oh, that is 5 hours and 30 minutes. The correct option is 5:30. Option number 1 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? That is 12 hours and 0 minutes. Option number 2 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? That is 2 o'clock, right? 2 hours and 0 minutes. So option number 4 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? That is 11 hours and 0 minutes. The correct option is option number 2. What time does the clock show? That is 9:30. The correct option is option number 4, 9:30 it is. What time does the clock show? That is 12:30. Option number 2 is the correct option. What time does the clock show? Which is the correct option? That is 3, sorry, 7:30. The correct option is 7:30. What time does the clock show? Time does the clock show? What time does the clock show? That is 4 o'clock. Option number 2 is the correct option. That is 3:30. The correct option is 3:30. Okay, you can complete the lesson by yourself later today. So we were working on grade 2 math. Chapter we were working on is time. The lessons we have covered today: match analog clocks and times, digital clocks and times, read clocks and write times, hours, read clocks and write times. So please make sure before the next session you can complete all the practice questions for the lessons we just did. That is your home next session. So if you need more help with any of the lessons, you can say in the chat box. I'm here to answer all your questions and confusions if you have any. So any questions you can please ask if you have any. No questions? Okay, then that's all for today. See you in the next session. Bye, everyone.